In this video, I'm going to show you 5 pro tips for using the recording software on your computer in creative ways. The recording software I'm going to use for all my examples is GarageBand because I love GarageBand. I'll use GarageBand as an instrument even when the rest of the session is in Pro Tools or whatever. And also because GarageBand is basic and it's free. If you have an Apple computer, then you already have GarageBand on your computer. But even if you don't use GarageBand, that's fine. All of the advice I'm about to show you is going to work on whatever recording software you use. My first piece of advice is there can be something very cool about the combination of a MIDI programmed part and a live human performance together. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll explain in a second. But the basic point here is that combining those things has its own sort of groove that I think can be powerful. We'll get back to that in a second. First, I just want to walk you through what I mean by MIDI programmed parts. Software like GarageBand is not just used to record what you play. It's also got drum machines and synthesizers and fake instruments in it that you can play by programming MIDI parts. So real quick, the way to do this is create a new track, choose software track, and then it's going to give you all its options for all the different fake instruments it has. Some of them are going to be drum machines. Some of them are going to be like imitations of real instruments. One bonus pro tip is I think the Lindrum is an especially good drum machine. So we're going to start with that. And now you can write a drum machine part by bringing up the MIDI editor. What's going on here is that whole area from left to right represents one measure of music. And all those vertical columns are like the 16th notes, like the 16 slices you could use to carve up that measure of music. So you can write these little bars everywhere you want the drum machine to do something. And then where you put them up or down is going to correspond with that keyboard, and each of those will be different notes. But since we picked a drum machine, all the notes are going to be like the different drums of a fake drum set. Okay, so I'm going to whip up a little beat, and then we're just going to loop that. Here it is. And then I'm going to start a different MIDI track. This is going to be a synthesizer bass. I'm going to come up with a little bass part to go with it. Let's do C altered dominant to F minor 11. Okay, now when you play those two things together, they're going to be perfectly in time. Okay, that's one thing. But what I'm going to do now is bring in 2 tracks of me playing rhythm guitar. And in each of these 2 performances, I'm trying to fill in the gaps in the perfect quantized robotic rhythm section. I'm like playing into the holes and trying to inject a certain like human looseness into that. And there's an overall effect between like my playing and the perfect rhythm section underneath me that I think has its own vibe. One bonus pro tip is, since this example turned out kind of funky, recording a direct guitar signal is often a good funky guitar tone. In this case, I was literally recording out of a pedal. There was no amp, no microphone. I was just recording out of a compressor pedal. It was the Fairfield Circuitry Accountant, if you're curious. Anyway, it can be handy to like keep a running list of the effect pedals you have that you like the sound of when you record directly out of them. Another favorite of mine is the Gamechanger Plasma. That's like a fuzz. It's like a very unusual fuzz. That also sounds great if you record directly out of it. pro tip number 2 is the nice thing about having MIDI programmed parts is that it's easy to copy and paste them. So sometimes I'll exploit that to thicken up my bass parts in particular. I'll start by writing a bass part in MIDI world, just like we did for pro tip number 1. Then I'll copy and paste that part and fly it into a second track that's a completely different GarageBand bass synthesizer. So now I've got 2 different GarageBand basses playing the exact same part, but it's not going to sound like 2 things. It's going to sound like one thing that's huge. Let's listen to some examples. Here's the bass part I'm starting with. Now I'm cloning that part and running it on a completely different GarageBand bass synth. If you want to take this even farther, it can be cool to copy and paste it again and then pitch shift that one up an octave. So now you've got this higher octave in there. It can like add even more timbre to what you're doing. I find sometimes trying to blend multiple bass synthesizers is like a more effective thing to tweak than just having one bass synth sound that you're trying to make perfect. Here's an example of 3 different bass tracks all playing the same thing. For the next pro tip, we're going to talk about drum machines again. This pro tip is, I think it can be cool to introduce some swing into your drum machine patterns. Swing, real quick, is just a rhythmic effect where every other note gets played a little bit late. So instead of dot, 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 which is like even and has no swing, swinging it would turn it into dot, 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 dot. And there's like degrees of this. Like you could swing it a lot, which would become dot, ba, dot, ba, dot, ba, dot, something like that. Anyway, you could tell GarageBand to try to do this. For many years, I just assumed drum machine swing would sound corny and bad, but I've come to change my mind about this. Like it can actually sound good. So for starters, we're gonna set up a basic drum machine pattern. Here's this. To introduce swing into that, all you have to do is select all the notes and then go over to the side. There's this menu where you can like pick the swing feel you want, and they give them letter names, A, B, C, D. The difference is just that the further you get into the alphabet, the more swing is being put in. And by more swing, it just means more lateness. That's all it is. So let's pick one and listen to it. All right, now I think that's like usable. I like that. But you might have noticed the drum fill at the end got messed up. That's because what I actually wanted there was triplet feel. Triplet feel is another thing GarageBand can do. This is another way to add some interesting new vibes into your drum machine patterns. Just for that snare fill at the end, I'm going to select those notes only and put triplet feel on that. Okay, you hear how that like fixed it? Let's do something with that beat. For the next pro tip, we're going to talk about plugins. Plugins are just effects that come with GarageBand that you can apply to your tracks. Effects like reverb, chorus, distortion, whatever. Now, if you are a guitar player and you've messed around with GarageBand, you may have noticed that there's like a whole place in GarageBand where it's like you have a pedal board and you can like bring in fake pedals and like make a pedal board for yourself. one quick bonus pro tip I have for you is that I don't think any of those sound good. I don't think the pedal board effects in GarageBand are the good ones. I think the good ones are just the normal, boring plugins that don't have cute pictures or anything going on. They're just like over there on the side of the screen. Those can sound good. And I'm going to tell you what I think the best one is. The best one is called Pitch Shifter. You can create some very cool, very original new instruments by picking one of GarageBand's like MIDI fake sounds and then just pitch shifting it up an octave. And I'm going to play you my favorite. It's Wurlitzer pitch shifted up. But not just any Wurlitzer. It's like the cheap, weird, fake Wurlitzer that comes with GarageBand. The sound of that getting pitch shifted up is one of my favorite sounds ever. Now, if you look close, the other thing I'm doing here is I have some reverb on it, and I actually ran the reverb before the pitch shifter is applied, which is a no-no. I did that on purpose because I was trying to confuse the pitch shifter. I wanted the pitch shifter to like struggle to do its thing, and the sound of that, I think, is extremely cool. I've made a bunch of these YouTube videos, and I've like given away a lot of my tricks. This is the only one I've ever thought twice about putting in a YouTube video. The sound of the GarageBand Wurlitzer getting pitch shifted up, I use it so much, and it's like all over my next record that part of me is like a little protective of it, but I just decided like I'm going to give this away too. So feel free to use it, and in the meantime, I'm going to play you a snippet of an unfinished song on my next record. This is a work in progress, but it uses the GarageBand Wurlitzer pitch shifter thing. For pro tip number 5, I'm going to talk about how you can do some very cool low-tech sampling with GarageBand. Here's what I mean. Let's say you have audio files on your computer, like an MP3 or a WAV of a song that you want to mangle. You can just bring that song into GarageBand and it'll get its own track. And now you can start to edit that file, edit that song, and have your way with it. So for starters, let's take a practical example. I'm going to pick a song that has an isolated drum part and then use that drum part to make my own beat. Now, normally when you do this, you're supposed to license the material you're sampling. I'm not saying that's always how people do it. I'm just saying that's what you're supposed to do. So for this video, I'm going to use material that I have the license for. I'm going to use a song by my old band called Sweet Fix. I used to be in a band called Sweet Fix. It broke up, but you can still listen to it on Spotify if you want to. The material is still out there. We recorded one song that started just with a drum performance by itself, and I still like it. I like how it was recorded. I like how it sounds. It was produced by my producer, Jeff Stanfield, who I still work with in Cyber Attack. It was played by Marco Santini, who was the drummer of Sweet Fix. This is what that song sounds like. So I'm going to drag that song into GarageBand, slice off everything after that drum beat. And now what you got to do is match the tempo to that drum beat. This is the part that is like kind of bullshit, but you basically, you want to like see what tempo lines up with the number of measures of the portion of the song that is just the drum beat. In this case, it's 130 BPM. Now what you want to do is select that drum beat and check the box that says follow tempo and pitch. And if you do that, you can change the whole tempo of the whole thing, and GarageBand will stretch that drum sample to match the new tempo. So we're going to crash things way down. We started in 130 BPM. We're going to go down to 90 BPM. This is what happens. You hear how much cooler that is now? You hear how it's like all fucked up and great? There's a bunch of things happening here that I love, but the thing I love the most is that back at 130 BPM, there was a little bit of squeak on the kick drum pedal. Down at 90 BPM, that squeak turned into like a swing element. Like now to me, it sounds like some sort of weird percussion thing that has swing on it, which I like. By the way, this is the kind of shit that guitar players who do not listen to hip hop have been missing out on since the 1980s. Anyway, crashing the tempo down is great, but we're not done yet. The next thing I'm going to do is run some plug-in effects on that drum sample. I'm going to bit crush it. This is what that sounds like. Obviously, I love that. Now what I'm going to do is add some extra GarageBand drum machines to go with it. I'm going to add a fake GarageBand hi-hat and a fake GarageBand shaker. This is what those sound like.